works long hours and he's gone more than he's home. While away, I'm concerned that our kids are not having enough time with dad when he's home. And we got here that he travels a lot as a part of his military duties. When he's home, he just has a hard time shifting to being here with us. He tends to be skilled at directing, instructing, evaluating, but really doesn't shift into being a husband and or a dad. Do you have any suggestions? You know, the idea that those 4 R's, roles, rules, rituals, routines, and here we're talking about roles. My role as a father is not the same as my role as a husband. And I get a lot of men, they really struggle with that. When they come home, they, especially with military guys that are used to being in charge, you know, they know how to direct. They know how to give orders. They know how to tell people to do this. They know how to evaluate and grade, but they have a real difficult time being collaborative.
But that's their role as a worker. As
a military person.
Yeah, which is not.
I'm the boss.
What is not what home and family is about.
And you see the big shift there? So I'm away, and while I'm away, I'm in charge. I tell people what to do. Now I'm home, and I've got to shift away from that.
Right. And, you know, this comes back to our 90-10 rule. That they really have that role confusion where at work, it's 90% fact, 10% feelings. I don't have to be real engaged in how you feel about what I'm telling you need to do. But when I come home, I need to be engaged in that 90% feeling and 10% fact.
What Carrie is discussing is, if you will, work relationships are 90% facts and 10% feelings, where love relationships are 90% feelings and 10% facts. See, I fell in love with you because of the way we emotionally connected, the way that we establish ourselves in this love relationship. And it's not about being right. It's about the fact that you validate my feelings. You make me feel good about myself. You help me to work together with you collaboratively to this whole idea of a family. In this particular problem, you know, we've seen this before. You know, dad's got to shift to, you know, take off that work hat. And I use that metaphor too. I've used it with men, and it works really good with men or with people that work outside the home.
Being
in charge.
Because I'll say, you know, when you come home in the military, you have a hat. You actually wear a hat. And I'll say, you know, when you come home and you hang that hat up on the hook or the nail, you're done being in that role. You are now dad. You're now father, and you need to switch
Turn it off.
Switch that
Get the hat off. And so when I take my boss hat off and I put on my father hat on, a lot of times I'll see men who attempt to direct, criticize, guide, regulate their partners. And I like to say to them,
that's another confusion of my role, isn't it?
Yeah, we're fathering your wife. You're taking the position of I'm in charge of you, and that's a role violation.
And I'm not going to let the women off either, because wives mother, they'll mother their spouse. You know, and you know.
So in a relationally, emotionally healthy family, we like to see role appropriateness. Dad studies this notion of what it is to be a dad, studies this notion of what it is to be a husband, studies this idea about what it is to be a boss, sets limitations, you know, through, you know, conversations, to mutually sharing of our histories together, our time together. We course correct. Remember, we work together collaboratively to find a way for us to live together. Okay. I'm going to do question number 2, because that's again fitting us into this idea of emotionally healthy family. And here we go, because now we've been through the rules. Now we're going to work on one that came in that was about rules. It says, my husband's very strict. He's quick to punish the kids and watches over all that they do. At times, I believe he's too rigid. I think the kids, there's 2 of them. One's 8 and one's 10.
Okay.
I think the kids are more fearful of him than they should be. He's quick to punish. Once, when our son got a D in school, he grounded him for 6 weeks. He could not even go to baseball practice.
Wow.
Can you give me some ideas about being a parent and having rules that are more appropriate? And what are your thoughts on punishment, appropriate punishment?
What was the first part of the question? Give me what?
Give me some ideas about rules and implementing them as a parent.
Okay. And then about punishment, rules and implementing them as a parent.
You know, the idea that rules are the structure that regulate a family, and the idea that when you establish rules, they have to be appropriate, you know, for the children, their age, their ability to understand, and they have to work to function in increasing the quality of the relationship and the quality of the home life. Right?
Yep.
You know, some rules are easy. Kids, you know, children shouldn't play with knives. right? You would agree with that, right? And they shouldn't give them matches to go light candles when they're 4 years old.
Right.
So there's a lot of easy rules, Maybe it's not a good idea for, kids to be involved in high-risk situations. And so there's some healthy rules there.
But rules do help by giving children responsibility in the family. It teaches them how to be a part of it.
Sure.
And how to fit in. And it's also, rules are also a way to set limits.
I like what you're saying. Rules develop a hierarchy. We know who's in charge. Whoever sets the rules up.
Apparently, it's Dad in this family.
They define responsibility. Rules set limits.
Yeah.
And they have a range because as children get older, you tend to integrate them more into creating those ideas of rules. So the idea that rules change with family as they mature.
As the family matures, right.
Because they're able to do this on their own. And so, my ideas on this is, of course, that the rules should be involved as a family creation. You and your partner, you and your husband both should be establishing with this. And with some degree, you should be looking at, what are the abilities of the children to understand these rules and to be a part of this. And as we get a little bit, older, we should be able to ease up on some of these.
But some of this is a responsibility of a parent too. I mean, we were surprised by a D. How were we surprised by a D? Because in my mind, that means as a parent, I'm not staying connected and spending time with the child, checking the homework, making sure they understand, checking with the school and the teacher, checking my email maybe. My kid's school emails me. So, lots of times I'm not taking my responsibility as a parent when I see a child doing that thing like that. And now we're going to move on to this second part, which is about
punishment. And I find that consequences is the word that we should be using, and we should be kind of shying away from that word punishment.
Right.
The consequences of making a D are this, and those consequences should be, to such a way encouraging the child to do better.
Right.
If your son, this boy didn't tell me which one was 8 or 10, as the child was disengaged from baseball, if the baseball is working as a motivator, then it might have been better to say something like, I tell you what, you don't play baseball until you get your homework finished, and I've seen it.
Right.
Okay. And because that's a motivator.
Right. And you can also get the coach involved. I had one parent give me that as an example. If a coach realizes a kid isn't doing well, they can impact them also to say, you have to keep the grades up to participate.
But some consequences might be some additional work. You can say, look, this D that you had, as a result of that, we're going to give you some additional chores to do around the house, and we can actually measure those chores.
Right.
You can also find ways that you can ask the child, and I've done this with my son when he was 11. I said, this is not good,
right.
and there is a price to pay. Certain privileges that I'm going to tell you have to be given up. You can no longer play Xbox without permission.
And we also limited television. I mean, there are things you can do at home without taking away what may be a motivator to participate and be part of a team.
And it sounds kind of crazy, but you can explain to your child that, wait a second, just as I go to work, your job is school. And so if you're not doing that job very well, then I'm going to ask you, what additional duties would you like to do to make up for this, inadequate behavior? And it's really fun. Another thing, if you will, and I know it's a little bit off track from this, but I sincerely believe that by turning off the TV and the Xbox and all these PlayStation type things and say, look, you earn these privileges. They're not on a regular basis. And as you finish these tasks, you earn.
Right.
So
that's a positive consequence.
Positive.
When you do your job, here's what you've earned. Okay. And when you don't do your job, here's what the limitation on that's going to be.
We're going to be taking a break here. We'll be back in just a few seconds. And I'm Dr. Pilet.
And I'm Carrie Pilet.
We look forward to talking to you. Hey, I'm Dr. Pilet, and welcome back.
I'm Carrie Pilet, and for those of you that are just joining us, we're talking about emotionally healthy families tonight.
And I'm going to define that for you as any family that problem solves sufficiently well enough as to allow each member of the family to meet their goals or potential.
There you go.
Kind of a complicated thing there, but if you think about it, our job, mom and dad, children, is to support each other, overcoming those obstacles that allow us as parents to launch those kids and get them into the best direction possible. Okay?
So we're moving on to our third question. Our third question, and this one is talking about routines.
Routines,
which is our third R. And the question is, when I get home from work, I get bombarded at the door. My 2 kids, my wife, even the dog. I can just see the dog. We have a little dog, jumps up and down.
Mikey.
They all want my attention, to be hugged and to tell me about their days. I want to hear it all, and most days I do okay with this. Last week, though, I had a really bad day at work. I had a big project due, and when I got home, I lost it. I came in the door to the usual homecoming. I yelled at the kids and told my wife she wasn't doing a good job controlling them. The evening was ruined. My kids went to their rooms, and my wife wouldn't talk to me. I need some new ideas for the homecoming, as I really do want to hear about their day and enjoy time with them. What suggestions do you have? This really is talking about the routines. The routines are the kind of how we live our life, and the routine when he gets home is everybody meets him at the door, and they're all excited about their day, and he may be excited about his day, but wow, it just kind of is overwhelmed as he comes in the door.
I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but a lot of times when you get home, especially after a long day at work, you're just, your mind's spinning about all the things that you had to do. You're tired. You kind of, crash in the front door like a baseball player that's sliding for home base, and, you're tired, you're overwhelmed. And this particular story is evidence of high levels of stress. I'm walking in the front door and my mind's spinning, and I'm not prepared for the avalanche of those children and my partner as they all sort of fall in on top of me. And he really hadn't thought about it. He really hadn't given some anticipation to what's going to happen when I walk in the door.
Right.
And it caught him off guard.
Day, sure. And he handled it poorly.
Sure.
And he felt it. There's probably some guilt, it sounds like. And certainly I don't want to repeat this again, as he's saying, what can I do different?
Well, one thing I as a general rule in working with my guys, I work with the men in interventions, is I'll always warn them that they have to anticipate what's going to happen when they walk in the door.
Right.
The idea that mom's been home, the kids are there, they're waiting for you. You're the high point for their day. But we often don't consider that. We don't realize that when I walk in the door, it's like, wow, there he is. Sure. Oh, my God. And so you've got to reset your mind to be prepared for that. And when you're prepared for that, you've got to work within yourself through self-talk to help yourself not get into that state of being frazzled or stressed out.
Right. And so there are a couple of places that he may be able to intervene with this. And one is, to begin to change that mindset, take that hat off as he gets in the car coming home from work. And instead of continuing to process all that I've got to do, begin to process, I'm going home and I'm going to hear about their days, and to really flip to change that mindset, to be prepared to go in and to, have the rush at the door and to spend the time with them as he comes in the door, to hear about their days, maybe before he takes a break or goes and changes his clothes, or he has that time to relax.
We've done this, and it's something that does work. And you can sit with your partner and the kids and say, guys, look, when I walk in the door, I love you to death, and I swear you're the most important thing that's happened to me. But I need 30 minutes to take my clothes off, put on some fresh clothes, maybe take a shower, and that's where mom can help too. Come on, guys, dad's just getting home, give him a break, and it can be vice versa. The dad can say, look, come on, guys, give him a break, because that little bit of a space sometimes is all you need. That it's validated, that it's recognized, and we can just
to relax and
decompress.
Decompress is what I was looking for, and get yourself into that place where you really can enjoy the time that you get to spend with your family.
So routines are typically the day-to-day events that we performed just to keep order and function in our business. And of course, one routine is the routine of bringing kids to school, the routine of picking them up, the routine of dad coming home. But for the most part, these are the maintenance items that keep us and the family organized. And this is just one of those ideas of how we might apply this to routines, okay?
Yes.
We have not talked about rituals, and if you will, I'm going to do that because I didn't get a question that was emailed to me. And I'm going to go with you, if you will, how we define rituals. Remember the 4 R's. We're talking about roles, rules, rituals, and routines. And so the idea of rituals are those cherished, those special events in which we celebrate our identity as a family.
Right.
And to some extent, when I talk to men, because I do the men's groups, men really consider rituals things like going to church on Sunday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, those kind of things. And yet that is, in fact, how we celebrate our identity. But what I'm looking for is something a little bit more. I'm looking for you to identify those special events that you as a family, unique to you, unique to your characteristics, your aspirations, your desires. And as you exercise them in your life, this identifies you as different.
Right.
And if you will, sometimes that can be, hey, just going to the beach every Saturday and it's our time with our family.
Right.
We had friends that used to do a pizza night.
Right.
Pizza movie. Yeah. And the phones were turned off, the cell phones were turned off, and we had our time with our kids. So these ideas of having rituals don't have to be celebrations that are traditional like Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving, but can be something that's
they
more
can
in
even
touch
be
with
a celebration though about how do you celebrate birthdays in your family? How do you celebrate
That's good.
anniversaries in your family? How do you celebrate? What are the special events for you all, and how do you do that?
I was born and raised in New Orleans, and because, at that time, not eating meat on Friday was a tradition and for us a ritual. So eating at a seafood restaurant every Friday. And a few years later, when I was in the military and I drive back to New Orleans or fly back to New Orleans, say hi to mom and dad, I always knew where they were Fridays at 5:00 because they were always at lakeside seafood restaurant eating crabs and crawfish
and stuffed artichoke.
And that was a ritual. That was a ritual for them.
Yeah.
Well, and that concludes this portion of this to discuss the 4 R's: rules, rituals, and routines.
But I do want to make a comment about those 4 things, because if you are looking to get your family organized and to start being in that emotionally healthy place, those really do help to get rid of a lot of the chaos. A lot of the strife and discord and arguments will go away if you start identifying. If you just start working in those 4 areas, they're big.
Yeah,
I don't mean just kind of minimizes it, but they're you really start identifying those and getting things laid out and organized, and a lot of the strife will dissolve.